try to speak loud so you can hear me back there. I've been asked to share my story. My story, I know many of you, and my story is not like your story. My story is a little bit different. In fact, I was not raised in the church at all. From birth to 19 years old, I had very little knowledge of Jesus, didn't really care. I didn't know anything about his church other than what maybe my grandparents would share with me. But looking at it today, and it was kind of painful sometimes going back through your past, but looking at it today, God always had a plan for me, just like he does you. Both of my parents were raised in a Christian home. Once they married, they stopped worshiping completely. They lived a worldly life. So consequently, that was my kind of home that I grew up in. My parents' life, they were a mess. Closer? Can I hold it? Sure. But even though their lives were a mess, that's not coming through. I think it is. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think so. Even though their lives were a mess, I thought that was normal. I didn't know any different. My folks drank a lot. They fought a lot. My sister and I were always on edge, waiting for the next blow up, waiting for the next hammer to fall. I remember one time my sister and I were going down the road. We were in the back seat. Mom and Dad were drinking and driving, pulled over by the police. The police loaded them up in the police car and took them to jail, and we're standing there, scared to death. We don't know what to do. And a very kind highway patrolman took us to his home, told me that my parents made a bad decision, but don't hold it against them. Super kind. I remember that. My sister and I had babysitters often as we were growing up because Mom and Dad were always out partying. I thought it was normal, as I said. So I had very little guidance as a young person. When I was a little bit older, I still had no guidance. So I became worldly. I started living a worldly life. I made a ton of really bad choices. I started smoking when I was 12 years old, at home. I had no curfew when I was 13 years old. Didn't matter. When I started driving, I'd stay out all night. I started drinking. I remember, I don't know how I survived, but I remember one time we were drinking and some buddies of mine said, let's pull into this convenience store and let's get something to eat. And I said, well, that sounds good to me. I opened the door. Well, we weren't there yet. I started rolling down the road. Don't know how it didn't kill me. Another time, a friend of mine came up to my house and said, hey, let's go to lunch. I want to show you my new car. So he had this beautiful car. And so we're going down the road, and he said, watch this. And he just nailed it. His tires started spinning. We were going like 40, and it still had a lot of power. Going all over the road. We crossed the center line. We hit this tree on the other side of the road, hit it so hard that the headlights were looking at each other. Both of us were knocked out. Well, he wasn't knocked out as long as I was, so when I came to, he's wiping his fingerprints off of this car. Wasn't his car. He took it. I got 7 speeding tickets in the same month by the same cop. I had an out-of-control temper. Probably why I got 7 tickets from the cop. Many of my friends went to prison. I actually went and visited one of my good friends that went to prison. And when I walked in, they kind of frisk you, and you go through this one gate. And when I got in there, 4 different people hollered my name. They knew who I was. They were friends of mine. One of them said, "Are you here to visit or are you going to stay?" If you've ever been or ever heard about an Arkansas prison called Tucker Prison Farm, it's a pretty serious place to be. And I remember thinking then, really, the light bulb never went off in my head for a long time, but I remember thinking then that this is not good. I could end up here. Kind of a reality check. My life was an absolute mess, but deep down I knew it was a mess. When I would come, but the interesting thing is, and I still don't totally know where all of this came from, but I think I know where this came from. When I would come home, be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd lay down, been drinking, I would stop. And I didn't know God. But I would ask God, don't let me die, because I'm not ready. I had at least enough sense for that. Where did this come from? I have to say that God had a plan for me. That's where it came from. My grandparents, both on my mom and dad's side, were very impactful on my life, although I didn't really realize it at the time. Whenever I would visit my mother's mom and dad, they always made sure that we went to worship with them. So that was some exposure that I had. My other grandmother, my dad's mom, always lived in the same town we did. So she would always entice and invite my sister and I over to spend the night with her on Saturday night so she could get up early and take us to worship. Because of my grandparents and because of the random teaching that I heard in my early years, and especially because God loved me, I did start to take a look at my life and think about it in a different way. Where's it going now? Where's it going in the future? And now I can look back as I was pondering how I was going to present the story. Immediately, Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 11 came to mind that says, He's made everything beautiful in its time. He's also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from the very beginning to the end. I knew I had to change. I knew my life was a mess. My friends were living the same way as I was. Enter Patty into my life. When I started dating Patty, I really don't know why she dated me. But when I started dating her, I told her, like the first Sunday, I said, I'll take you to church. So I went with her to worship. Never thought about going to church on my own or inviting someone. But anyway, this deacon walks up to me. He was also a deputy sheriff. And he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing here?" You know, it didn't insult me. It didn't insult me at all. I didn't answer him at the time, but I thought about, well, I'm here for Patty, and I knew my life was going in the wrong direction. And obviously other people saw that my life was going in the wrong direction. But Patty was living a life that attracted me. It was so different than anything I had ever lived or seen or been around. Plus, she was the prettiest girl I'd ever seen. So I know now that God was showing the plan that He had for me. And I know God worked through Patty to help show the plan that He had for me. He protected my life from sinking so low and getting into the kinds of trouble that would be hard to get out of, would have ramifications for the rest of your life, take a lifetime to deal with. And I love at this point what 2 Peter 3 and verse 9 says, that the Lord is not slow keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he's patient, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. Psalm 33 and verse 11 says, the plans of the Lord stand forever, the purposes of his heart through all generations. Psalm 32 and verse 8 says, I'll instruct you and teach you in the way you should go, and I'll counsel you with my eye upon you. I consistently began worshiping with Patty, and I really started listening to what was being said. It did begin to change my heart. This particular congregation had Bible class morning and evening before worship. I didn't miss a service. I learned what I needed to do. I learned about the changes that I needed to make. But for quite a few months, I gripped the back of that pew and I was not going to do it. I resisted the invitation songs. I knew it was the right decision, but something was holding me back. But then finally, I decided I had to do it. It wasn't during a worship service. I was sitting there one afternoon contemplating my life. I remember vividly. And all of a sudden, the heaviest weight that I've ever felt was on my shoulders. The dread in my heart was overwhelming. And I knew I had to do something. So I told Patty, it's time. I must obey the gospel. I must be baptized. Another positive out of that was Patty's sister decided at the same time, so her and I share that together, that we were both immersed at the same time. I remember being so excited that I ran home and told my mom and dad. Guess what I did? I've been baptized. And they were okay with that. They were really happy with that, I believe. But I could see the hurt in their eyes because they knew the way they were living. And I think it was an indictment on them. My sister eventually obeyed the gospel. She's a faithful Christian today. She has 2 kids, faithful, and her son-in-laws are faithful. One is a youth minister. God did have a plan for me. I remember being resentful to my parents after I became a Christian for the way that they let me just go any way that I wanted to go. Didn't make me accountable for anything, and that resentment took a long time to get past. My mom died at 57 years old of lung cancer because she smoked. Her sister was a Christian at the time that Mom died, and she told me that Mom confided in her that she had not lived properly, that she really did repent, and she was comforting me, I think, and I hope that's true. My dad turned his life around years before he died. He became involved in the Rock Hill Church of Christ in Frisco, Texas. At his memorial service, people came up to me and they said, "Oh, we just love your dad. He's the kindest guy. I bet you had the best childhood." I just smiled. And they said, "He is such a servant. He does everything around here." Certainly wasn't the dad I grew up with, but God can change anybody's heart. I remember sitting next to him in the hospital, and he was sick, right before they put him on hospice care. And we were just kind of talking, and I just looked at him and I said, "Hey, thank you, Dad." He said, "For what?" I said, "Thank you for turning your life around thank you that I don't have to be concerned about where your soul is going. I won't grieve you near as hard as I could have. Since obeying the gospel, I've had the best life. I've had the most wonderful life. Life doesn't always have happy endings, but with God they do. And I've had the best life. I've been so blessed. Why have I been so blessed? If you travel to a foreign country, you ask yourself too, why are we so blessed? Because God had a plan for me, just like He does your life. And Romans chapter 5 and verse 8 rings so true. But God demonstrates His own love toward us, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us.